The weapon trembled in Krix's three-fingered grip, its barrel pointed directly at the human female's chest. He'd spent 6 cycles preparing for this moment, studying human anatomy, understanding their weaknesses, memorizing the 17 points where a plasma bolt could end their fragile existence. But nothing, absolutely nothing in the Galactic Combat Manual had prepared him for what happened next. She looked at the gun, then she looked at him. Then, and this is the part that would haunt his mandibles for years, she reached up and adjusted her ponytail. "You done?" she asked, her voice carrying the bored inflection of someone waiting for a particularly slow elevator. Krix's confidence, which had been sitting at a comfortable 70%, plummeted faster than a Vorgath cargo freighter with failed thrusters. His primary eye twitched. His secondary eye developed a nervous flutter. His tertiary eye, the one he saved for special occasions, decided this was a fantastic time to take a vacation. "I said," and here his vocal synthesizer cracked embarrassingly, "that you are my prisoner, human. You will come with me to the enforcement hub, where you will face judgment for your crimes against the Galactic Commerce Federation." The human, who had introduced herself earlier as Morgan Hayes, tilted her head. The gesture would have been adorable on a Fluffian kit. On a human it somehow felt predatory. "Crimes?" She actually laughed. Not a nervous titter, not a fear-induced giggle, but a genuine, full-throated laugh that echoed through the cargo bay. "Oh, sweetie, you're adorable. Did they send you because you're new? Is this like a hazing thing?" Krix felt his chromatophores shifting to a deep purple, the Zentari equivalent of a blush. "I am a fully certified enforcement officer, 4th class. I graduated top of my academy cohort, 4th class." Morgan nodded sagely, as if he'd just confirmed something incredibly important. "So that's what like mall cop equivalent?" The insult processor in Krix's translator chip worked overtime. Mall cop, a reference to human security personnel assigned to commercial spaces, low tier, barely threatening. The comparison made his anterior glands clench. "I am authorized to use lethal force," he squeaked, hating himself immediately. "Sure you are." She took a step forward. Krix took a step back. She grinned. "Oh no. Oh no no no." That grin. He'd seen it in the training hollows, the ones they showed to scare junior officers into taking humans seriously, the ones that came with warnings and mandatory psychological evaluations afterward. That was a predator's smile, all teeth and confidence. The kind that said the food chain had just been violently rearranged and nobody had bothered to inform the former apex predator. "Listen, Krix, right?" She'd remembered his name. Why had she remembered his name? "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to lower that cute little plasma pistol, which I'm pretty sure is set to stun anyway because you keep thumbing the safety like you're afraid it might go off. And we're going to have a conversation like civilized beings." "Oi, what? How did you?" 22 years, buddy. I've been in space for 22 years. You know how many times someone's pointed a gun at me?" She held up her hand, fingers extended. "Actually, I lost count around 73, so let's just say a lot. You know how many times it's worked?" Krix didn't want to know. His survival instincts were screaming at him to not know. But his mouth, operating independently of his better judgment, whispered, "How many?" "0. She snapped her fingers, and Krix flinched so hard he nearly dropped the weapon. "Not once, not ever. And you want to know why?" "Why?" His voice had gone squeaky again. He was never living this down. If he survived... No. When he survived, 4th class officers didn't die on routine collection assignments. The statistics said so. The statistics were very clear. The statistics had clearly never met Morgan Hayes. She leaned against a cargo container, arms crossed, looking for all the universe like someone settling in for a comfortable chat. "Because humans don't work the way you people think we work. See, the rest of you, you evolved on normal planets. Nice gravity, reasonable atmosphere, predictable weather. Your predators were, what, maybe twice your size? Maybe venomous? Scary, sure, but manageable." Krix's mandibles clicked nervously. This was starting to sound like one of Professor Thell's lectures on Deathworld species. He'd failed that class. Twice. Earth, though. Morgan's eyes got that distant look humans acquired when discussing their homeworld. Other species talked about their planets with fondness, nostalgia, maybe a little homesickness. Humans talked about Earth the way soldiers discussed wars they'd barely survived. Earth tried to kill us every single day for 4 million years. Megafauna that could swallow you whole. Weather patterns that spawned kilometer-wide vortexes of destruction. Viruses that mutated faster than we could develop immunities. Volcanoes. Earthquakes. Tsunamis. And you know what we did? Evolved orbital flight and left? Krix suggested, hopefully. We thrived. Her laugh was somehow both delighted and slightly unhinged. We looked at a planet actively trying to murder us, and said, hey, let's build cities here, let's have babies, let's invent agriculture in areas that flood regularly. We domesticated wolves, Krix, apex predators with bite forces that could crush bone. We turned them into purse dogs, and made them wear sweaters. The weapon wavered. Krix's arms were getting tired. How long had he been holding it up? 30 seconds? 30 years? Time had lost all meaning. And then, Morgan continued, warming to her subject, we invented weapons. Not energy weapons, not plasma or phase or quantum shift technology. No, we invented things that use controlled explosions to hurl small pieces of metal at supersonic speeds. We built bombs that could crack continents. We split the atom while still figuring out basic spaceflight. We weaponized biology, chemistry, physics, and psychology. We turned warfare into an art form before most species had figured out agriculture. Krix's translator was feeding him context. The words coming through were technically correct, but the implications made his nervous system want to shut down entirely. So when you point that gun at me, Morgan said, her voice dropping to something quiet and dangerous, all I see is Tuesday. The plasma pistol clattered to the deck. Krix hadn't consciously decided to drop it. His fingers had simply given up, staging a mutiny against his brain's increasingly poor decision-making. Good choice. Morgan kicked the weapon away, sending it skittering across the cargo bay. Now let's talk about why you're really here. And please don't insult me with that Commerce Federation nonsense. I paid my docking fees. I'm fully licensed. My cargo manifests are cleaner than a Pristinian meditation chamber. Hey. Krix's voice box had apparently decided coherent speech was overrated. There were reports. Human unauthorized. Sector 7. Sector 7 is open space. Has been for 30 cycles. Was open space. The Vrin Collective claimed it last season. Morgan's expression did something complicated. They what now? Claimed it. Legal documentation, filed with the Federation. They're calling it New Vrin. Very official. The Vrin Collective, Morgan said slowly. The same guys who couldn't organize a mating flight without triplicate forms and committee approval just claimed an entire sector. They hired consultants, Krix offered weakly. Of course they did. She ran a hand through her hair, that same casual gesture that had started this whole mess. And let me guess, these consultants suggested they needed to clear out any existing traffic. Something like that. And somehow my ship, which has been running routes through Sector 7 for 6 years, is now a problem. It wasn't a question, but Krix nodded anyway. Morgan was quiet for a moment, her eyes distant. Then she smiled, and Krix realized with mounting horror that this smile was different from the predator grin. This one was worse. This one involved math. Okay, she said brightly. New plan? You're going to take me to whoever hired you. I cannot possibly do that. Regulations strictly prohibit. Krix. Just his name, just one word. But the way she said it made his species' ancient prey instincts wake up screaming. I'm asking nicely. I rarely ask nicely, mostly because I've found that asking nicely doesn't work with most species. But you seem like a decent guy who got handed a terrible assignment by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. So I'm giving you a choice. Take me to your boss, or I take myself to your boss and mention that you let me go because I looked at you funny. The logic was flawless. The threat was implicit but crystal clear, and most importantly, Krix realized with a sinking feeling in his digestive sacs, she was right. This whole thing stank of setup. New officers didn't get collection assignments for experienced human cargo runners. That was asking for paperwork. Lots of paperwork, the kind of paperwork that ended careers, unless someone wanted it to end badly. If I do this, he said carefully, I'm violating 17 different protocols. Probably. I could lose my commission. Definitely possible. I might face criminal charges. Now you're getting it. Krix looked at the dropped plasma pistol, gleaming innocently on the deck. He looked at Morgan, who radiated the kind of calm confidence usually reserved for black hole researchers and bomb disposal technicians. He thought about his apartment, his pet squeaker, his pension plan that wouldn't vest for another 40 cycles. Then he thought about the look on Senior Officer Vex's face when he'd handed Krix this assignment. That smile. That knowing, satisfied smile. We go to the enforcement hub, Krix said, his decision solidifying. We request a meeting with Senior Officer Vex. We do this officially. Now you're thinking like a human. Morgan clapped him on the shoulder, and even though she was clearly pulling the impact, Krix still felt his exoskeleton creak. This is going to be fun. Fun, Krix repeated numbly. Yes, fun. That's exactly what I need. More fun. She laughed again. That wild, slightly manic sound that humans made when they were either terrified or excited. With humans, it was apparently the same thing. As they headed toward his patrol ship, Krix activated his emergency beacon. Just in case. The response came immediately. Officer Krix, report status. Situation under control, he lied smoothly. Bringing the human in for processing. Copy that. Vex wants a personal debrief. Of course he did. Morgan caught his eye, mouthed the words "I told you so," and grinned. Krix's life, which had been so beautifully boring just 2 hours ago, had officially become interesting. He hated interesting. Interesting meant reports. Interesting meant investigations. Interesting meant explaining to his clutch mother why he'd been fired. But as he watched Morgan Hayes settle into his patrol ship like she owned it, humming some discordant human melody, Krix realized something else. Interesting also meant he was about to see Senior Officer Vex's face when a human walked into the enforcement hub voluntarily. And honestly, that almost made the inevitable career destruction worth it. Almost. The enforcement hub loomed ahead like a bureaucratic nightmare wrapped in steel plating and bad architectural choices. Krix had always thought it looked intimidating, all sharp angles and cold lighting. Now watching Morgan lean forward in the co-pilot seat to get a better view, he realized it looked less like a symbol of galactic authority and more like a very expensive filing cabinet. Cozy, Morgan said, her tone suggesting it was anything but. Very authoritarian chic. Did someone actually design this or did it just happen? The architect won 3 awards, Krix said defensively. Were the awards for most likely to depress visiting civilians? Innovation in structural intimidation, actually. Morgan snorted. Of course they have awards for that. You people bureaucratize everything. I once spent 14 hours getting a permit to transport water. Water. The universe is full of it. Was it special water? It was tap water from Earth. I was visiting my sister. Krix's mandibles clicked in confusion. That requires a permit, potentially invasive microbiological content. Standard procedure. See, this is why humans think the rest of you are hilarious. She gestured at the approaching station. You're all so obsessed with rules and procedures that you forget to ask whether the rules make any sense. Rules are what separate civilization from chaos. Says the guy who dropped his gun because I adjusted my hair. Krix couldn't argue with that. His mandibles remained stubbornly silent. The docking procedure went smoothly, which immediately made Krix suspicious. In his experience, things that went smoothly were usually traps. His suspicions intensified when the docking coordinator's voice came through, all false cheer and practiced enthusiasm. Officer Krix, welcome back. Senior Officer Vex is expecting you in Conference Room 7. Conference Room 7? Krix's chromatophores flickered nervous yellow. Not processing. Special circumstances, he said. I'm sure it's fine. Nothing about that was fine. Conference room 7 was where they held disciplinary hearings. Morgan caught his expression. That's where careers go to die. Excellent. I love a good death room. She stood, stretching in a way that made her spine produce several alarming cracking sounds. Let's go ruin someone's day. The walk through the hub attracted attention. Krix could feel every eye, stalk and optical sensor tracking their progress. Humans were rare enough in this sector. Humans walking voluntarily into the enforcement hub, accompanied by a fourth-class officer who looked like he was marching to his own execution. That was entertainment. Officer Drax from maintenance waved. Krix ignored him. Technician Euler made a throat-cutting gesture. Krix pretended not to see it. Junior Officer Plex actually stopped and stared, his jaw hanging open in a way that would have been comical if Krix's entire career wasn't circling the drain. Popular guy, Morgan observed. I keep to myself. Translation, nobody likes you because you follow the rules. I prefer to think of it as professional integrity. Sure, we'll go with that. Conference room 7 sat at the end of a corridor that seemed specifically designed to maximize dread. The lights were dimmer here. The air circulation was worse. Even the floor panels seemed judgmental. Krix paused at the door, his hand hovering over the entry panel. Second thoughts? Morgan asked. Approximately 700 of them. Want to hear something funny? Not particularly. I'm going to tell you anyway. She leaned closer, and Krix caught a whiff of something that his translator identified as coffee, a human stimulant known for its addictive properties and alarming effects on cardiovascular systems. Whatever happens in there, you're already fired. Vex set you up. This whole thing was designed to fail, so really you've got nothing to lose. The logic was sound. The delivery was terrible. The accuracy was devastating. That's supposed to make me feel better? Does it? Krix thought about it. Oddly, yes. See? Humans are great at pep talks. We've had a lot of practice motivating each other to do stupid things. She straightened her jacket, a garment that looked like it had survived several small wars and possibly one large one. Ready? Absolutely not. Perfect. He pressed the entry panel. Senior Officer Vex sat at the head of the conference table, his scales gleaming under the harsh lighting. He was a Saurian, which meant he was large, cold-blooded, and had a natural expression that suggested he was perpetually disappointed in everyone. Two other officers flanked him. Krix recognized them immediately. Enforcement specialists. The kind they brought in when they wanted things documented properly. This wasn't just a setup. This was a theatrical production. Officer Krix, Vex said, his voice carrying the warmth of a glacial period. You were instructed to bring the human in for processing, not for a meeting. With respect, senior officer, the human came voluntarily. Did she? It wasn't a question. Vex's eyes shifted to Morgan. Human Morgan Hayes. You're accused of 743 violations of commercial transport regulations. Morgan blinked. 743? Give or take. That's impressively specific. Did someone actually count, or is this like an estimate? One of the specialists leaned forward. We have documentation. Of course you do. Can I see it? The question hung in the air like a particularly awkward smell. It's sealed pending investigation, Vex said smoothly. So you have documentation that I can't see for crimes I allegedly committed, but you won't specify in a sector that was apparently claimed by the Vrin Collective without any notification to existing traffic. Morgan's smile could have cut glass. Does that about cover it? Krix watched Vex's expression with the fascination of someone witnessing a natural disaster. The senior officer's scales were shifting through several concerning colors. The Vrin Collective has every right to enforce their territorial claims. Sure they do. Weird, though, that their territorial claims just happen to include the most profitable trade routes in this quadrant. Also weird that they hired enforcement consultants. Also super weird that those consultants are from a Saurian firm. Also incredibly weird that you, Morgan, pointed directly at Vex, have a brother who works for that exact firm. The silence in the room was so profound that Krix could hear his own circulatory system panicking. Vex started, then stopped. How did you? Public records, buddy. Took me about 20 minutes while we were flying here. Your brother Thex works for Territorial Consultants Incorporated. They filed 63 territorial claims in the last 2 cycles. Every single one conveniently targets independent traders. Every single one results in either license revocations or extremely expensive permit requirements. And let me guess, your firm offers to broker those permits for a small fee. The specialists were looking at each other, then at Vex, then at their datapads, like they wished they could climb inside and disappear. This is absurd, Vex hissed. You have no proof of any wrongdoing. I have 47 different pieces of correspondence between your brother and the Vrin collective leadership. I have financial records showing suspicious payments. I have testimony from 6 other traders who were driven out of business by similar schemes. Morgan pulled out a data chip, set it on the table with a soft click. I also have a really good lawyer who specializes in corruption cases and is probably going to have a field day with this. Krix felt his mandibles drop open. She'd come prepared. Not just prepared. She'd come armed with the kind of documentation that ended careers, triggered investigations, and generally made everyone involved wish they'd chosen different professions. You, Vex pointed a claw at Morgan, his composure cracking like a hull breach, are making serious accusations. I'm stating facts. There's a difference. She leaned back in her chair, radiating confidence. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to clear my record. You're going to clear the records of every trader you've screwed over in the last 2 cycles. You're going to resign quietly, and you're going to hope that I don't decide to make this public. And if I refuse? Morgan's smile widened. Then I make it public anyway, and instead of a quiet resignation you get a very loud investigation. The kind with journalists and oversight committees, and probably some really uncomfortable questions about where all that bribe money went. The math was simple, the threat was clear, the choice was obvious. Vex looked like he wanted to argue. His scales rippled through several shades of angry crimson. His claws flexed against the table surface, leaving small scratches in the polymer. Then he deflated, all that aggressive posturing collapsing like a failed atmospheric seal. Fine.
Excellent.
Morgan clapped her hands together. See? Diplomacy. Humans are great at it. Krix, you're my witness. Make sure this all gets documented properly. Krix realized everyone was looking at him. The specialists. Vex. Morgan. With that knowing grin that suggested she'd planned this entire outcome from the moment she'd adjusted her ponytail. I, he said carefully, will ensure all proper protocols are followed. Good lad. Morgan stood, stretched again, produced more alarming joint noises. Oh. And Vex, if I hear about any retaliation against Officer Krix here or any of the other traders, or really anyone even vaguely connected to this situation, I will personally ensure that every single news outlet in this sector gets a full copy of my documentation. Clear? Crystal? Vex managed through clenched teeth. Wonderful. I love it when we understand each other. She turned to Krix. Come on, officer, buy you a drink. You look like you need 17. The walk back through the hub was different this time. People still stared, but now there was something like respect mixed with the confusion. Word traveled fast in enclosed environments. By the time they reached the docking bay, Krix's comm unit was pinging with messages. He ignored all of them. The bar was called the Neutron Star, which was optimistic given that it was a dingy establishment that smelled of recycled air and questionable life choices. Morgan found a corner booth, ordered something called whiskey, and convinced the bartender that Krix needed whatever his species drank for celebration. So she said once they were settled, you're probably wondering how I knew all that. Among other things. I didn't. Not until about halfway through the flight here. Krix's drink arrived. It was blue. He didn't trust blue beverages. What? I mean, I suspected. Your boss's smile was too satisfied. The assignment was too convenient. But I didn't have proof until I started digging. She took a sip of her drink, made a face. This is terrible. I love it. Anyway, Humans are really good at pattern recognition. It's a survival thing. We had to figure out which plants were poisonous and which predators were hunting us. That skill translates surprisingly well to spotting corruption. You bluffed. I investigated rapidly, and then bluffed about how long I'd known. She grinned. There's a difference. That's insane. That's humanity. We're all insane. It's our primary survival strategy. Krix took a cautious sip of his blue beverage. It tasted like regret and poor decisions. Perfect. What happens now? Now, you probably get promoted. Someone has to replace Vex, and you're the officer who helped expose the corruption. Looks great on a record. I didn't do anything. You did everything. See? That's where you're wrong. Morgan pointed at him with her glass. You made a choice. You could have dragged me to processing, filed your report and let the system eat me alive. Instead, you listened. You thought. You acted like a person, instead of a protocol drone. That matters. It nearly got me fired. But it didn't, and now you've got a story. Trust me, in this business, stories are currency. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, two beings from entirely different worlds, brought together by bureaucratic malfeasance and one very aggressive ponytail adjustment. Can I ask you something? Krix said finally. Sure. When I pointed the gun at you, were you actually scared? Morgan considered the question. Honestly, a little. Guns are dangerous. Even stun settings can mess you up. But mostly I was annoyed. I had a schedule. I had cargo to deliver, and some fourth-class officer who looked like he was going to throw up was getting in my way. I did not look like I was going to throw up. You absolutely did. My species doesn't even have a vomiting reflex. Then you would have been the first. She finished her drink, signaled for another. Here's the thing about humans, Krix. We're scared all the time. Every single day. But we've been scared for so long that we've learned to just keep going anyway. Fear is just another thing to deal with, like taxes or bad weather or that weird noise your ship makes that you really should get checked but probably won't. That sounds exhausting. It really is. But it's also kind of great. Because if you're always scared, then nothing is particularly more scary than anything else. Angry boss. Corrupted system. Guy with a gun. Tuesday, Thursday and Saturday respectively. You just deal with it and move on. Krix thought about his species, who had evolved in relatively safe conditions on a stable world. They'd developed a bureaucracy as a way to create order, to make sense of a universe that could be chaotic. Humans apparently had looked at chaos and decided to make friends with it. Your species is terrifying, he said. Yeah, we get that a lot. Morgan raised her glass. To surviving Tuesday. To surviving Tuesday, Krix echoed, clinking his blue beverage against her whiskey. 3 hours later, Krix received official notification of his promotion to 3rd class. The message was brief, professional, and didn't mention anything about recent events. He also received a personal note from Commissioner Threll, suggesting that his quick thinking and dedication to proper protocols had been noted. Morgan had been right. Stories were currency. She'd left by then, her cargo delivered, her route cleared, her record cleansed, but before departing, she'd left him something. A data chip with a single file labeled emergency use only. Krix didn't open it. Didn't need to. He could guess what it contained. More documentation, more evidence, insurance, human style. He kept it anyway, stored in a secure location where only he could access it. Just in case Tuesday came around again. Because now he understood something fundamental about humans. They didn't survive by being stronger or faster or more advanced. They survived by being relentlessly, exhaustingly, persistently thorough. They prepared for everything. They planned for disasters. They turned paranoia into an art form and called it prudence. And somewhere out there, Morgan Hayes was probably doing it all over again, adjusting her hair at someone else's weapon, asking if they were done, and turning their Tuesday into a very, very long day. Krix finished his blue beverage, filed his reports with meticulous accuracy, and went home to his apartment, where his squeaker was waiting. Life returned to normal. Boring, predictable, beautifully mundane normal. Exactly the way he liked it. Though sometimes late at night he'd think about that laugh. That wild, manic, perfectly human sound that suggested the universe was absurd and the only rational response was to laugh back. And despite himself, despite every instinct his species had developed over millions of years of careful evolution, Krix would smile. Humans, absolutely terrifying. Absolutely magnificent. And he'd met one and survived to tell the tale. That, as Morgan would say, was worth at least 17 drinks.